Hello, everyone. Welcome. Happy Wednesday. We're so happy you've joined us for today's session, Digital Data and AI Snapshot in Women's Football. I'm Hannah Kuntz, the Head of Partnerships and Growth for Women's Sport at Ready Sport Global, or Ready, and I'll be moderating today's session alongside our two speakers, Lucy Mills and Stefan Lavén. Before we get into the session, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. We'll be recording the session, so sharing that with all of you afterward. Please do feel free to use the chat as we go if you have any comments, questions, or feedback. We will have a dedicated Q&A portion of the session at the end of the hour. So if you have something that you want to raise, feel free to wait until that. But as I said, feel free also to use the chat as we go. Here's how the session will run. First, I'm going to hand it over to Lucy Mills, Ready founder, who will share the 6 key insights from snapSHOT, which is Ready's first market intelligence report. And then we'll have a look at what those findings mean for women's football clubs, leagues, and the wider industry with Stefan Lavén, CEO and founder of Data Talks. So snapSHOT began as a simple question. Where does women's football actually stand when it comes to digital, data, and AI capability? And how do those critical elements impact things like fan engagement, commercial growth, sponsorship, and clubs' day-to-day operations? Between February and May 2026, we spoke to representatives from 27 women's football clubs and 2 leagues across 16 markets. Everything from CEOs to club presidents to marketing and communications staff and others as well. We're so grateful for all of the individuals at the clubs and leagues who took the time to share their experience and insights with us. So today, we're really grateful for all of you who've joined us to dive into the key insights from snapSHOT. But snapSHOT is not just a report. What came out of the consultations is really a roadmap. It offers key insights, actual recommendations, and the foundation for conversations like the one that we're having today. So it's now my pleasure to introduce our 2 key speakers, Lucy Mills and Stefan Lavén. Lucy Mills is the founder and chief catalyst at Ready, or Ready Sport Global. Before starting Ready 4 years ago, Lucy spent 15 years working in international football, including roles at FC Barcelona and the Right to Dream Group. Stefan Lavén is a recognized commercial growth expert and sports tech entrepreneur with more than 25 years of experience building international tech companies. As the founder of Data Talks, an AR marketing and data platform for the sports industry, he helps sports organizations across Europe and beyond turn supporter data into new revenue streams. Stefan is also the co-founder of Sports Tech Sweden and the author of More Supporters, Superior Sales, and Real Revenue. Passionate about the intersection of AI and sport, he's on a mission to help clubs build stronger fan relationships and unlock their full commercial potential. We have a really exciting session planned for you today, and without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Lucy to kick things off.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Hannah, and thank you so much to everybody for being here and those of you who are playing back the recording as well. So yeah, as Hannah was saying, for the past few years at Ready, we've been working on sports innovation and technology initiatives across professional sport, the Olympic movement, sport for development, and especially education, training, and readiness around technology and AI. And so as women's sport has continued to evolve and professionalize at pace, we wanted to check in and examine it through this same lens. And so for some time we were feeling that the professional women's game was growing, professionalizing, commercializing at a really exciting pace, but that many of the clubs and leagues were still building the systems, the data, the internal capacity needed to keep pace and keep driving that momentum. So introducing snapSHOT. So we set about to understand this dynamic and put insight and evidence to this. And so with a focus on the off the field, the business side of the women's game, so the commercial and operational side, in the hope that it would both provide us, as Hannah was saying, and others working in women's sport with a clearer picture of the role, the realities of digital data and AI, which for us it would mean that we could engage better and bring more value to women's sport going forward. So the process developed both thanks to our work over the past 4 years in this area, and then taken directly to clubs in a structured consultation series. So between February and May, we spoke directly with representatives from professional and semi-professional women's football clubs and leagues in 16 countries. Yeah, from Argentina and Australia through to Sweden, the US. And the clubs represented a genuinely different range of contexts. So, fully independent women's clubs, separate ownership, but affiliated with men's clubs, part of traditional historic men's clubs. Ranging from having been founded in the 1970s through to a couple of years ago, and many changes and mergers and acquisitions and promotions and relegations and so on. So it's not a statistically significant sample, but we think that it really captured the broad range of women's football and and is the starting point to have an honest look at where women's football is at. So what did we spend time asking the clubs? So we set out to understand what clubs and leagues are working with when it comes to their commercial ambitions, fan engagement priorities, approaches to fan data, the digital tools, the infrastructure that they're using to work with those ambitions, the use of an appetite of AI, and then their reflections on some of the constraints and challenges and barriers that they're facing, and whether there's a kind of a tech perspective on those challenges. And then also we explored kind of the organizational change and cultural issues as well, and leadership appetite for change and other cultural considerations. So we have 6 insights. I'll talk through here kind of on a high level. But before I do that, one thing that was consistent across every single club, irrespective of size, market, was the fact that fan engagement was the number one growth priority everywhere. So fan engagement was the number one growth priority. And so this is really the backdrop for everything that follows, and really informed and shaped a lot of the consultation and the insights. So first insight, digital maturity varies, but that gap is closable. Why I say it's closable is because through the consultations, we were able to sort of create this matrix of 4 phases of digital maturity, noticing, okay, some of the more nascent digital maturity, what kinds of characteristics and setup clubs are having, through to the more advanced systems, not just bigger club equals better at all, but and so we noticed that actually with some small changes, ways of working, implementing certain things, that clubs could be and were going through phases to becoming more digitally mature. With that said, some insights. So many women's clubs do not have a digital and data strategy specific to and designed around women's audience, the commercial model, operational context. Sometimes it's inherited from the men's side, where they're part of men's teams. The responsibility for digital data has been often a fractional role or a one-person role, typically with marketing and comms, exposing vulnerability. So where the digital and data capacity is concentrated in a single person rather than being embedded in systems and processes. Some clubs reported that leagues were stepping in and providing support with digital and data strategy, which was really great to hear. The unevenness of maturity as well is particularly striking when compared to the off the field, the performance area. So um, the use of technology and analytics in the performance side seemed to kind of give a picture that it was much more embedded than on the commercial operational side. Um, the statistic there, so over 40% of the clubs in the sample do not have a CRM. So that really speaks to the earlier phases of digital maturity and managing fan relationships and community relationships through lists and Excel and manual exports, which point goes on to the second key insight, which was that fan data is the most under leveraged, underutilized commercial asset. And so the challenge here is not necessarily a lack of data, but rather a lack of connecting and operationalizing and making decisions based on data. So most clubs are collecting data through ticketing and in some cases merchandise and social data. They often remain fragmented. They're not capturing the data in one place and connecting it. And so limited decision making based off of that data. Ticketing was by far the most established data collection tool, mostly used for access control into stadiums as opposed to building commercial intelligence. And then we also saw that there's often this like low friction ticketing, so get cash payments or offering just a really easy way to get people in, which also not really knowing who's coming in to be able to then bring them back. So and yeah, things like ambitions around having a club app and working towards connecting data. That there's a few interesting examples there where the strongest clubs commercially were the ones that were connecting these different points. The third insight, so we saw time and time again these incredible, creative, strong marketing and communications plans and campaigns, and really that the operational systems supporting the marketing ambitions are still need to be kept at pace. So a few things here on the marketing side. Fan segmentation sort of speaks to the previous point. Fewer than a third of the clubs in the sample are segmenting and having more kind of personalized messaging to fans. A lot of the time, clubs are relying on social media campaigns and undifferentiated email communications. So moving from broad awareness building to conversion is a consistent challenge. There were several clubs that are running shared social media accounts across men's and women's teams. Comments around converting men's fans to women's fans is a consistent challenge, even if games are free or very subsidized, low cost, and the acknowledgement that we need to be looking for and building new communities and new audiences. And then other commercial areas, so e-commerce and merchandise seem to be an area of opportunity that is gaining popularity. Sponsorship. Most clubs in the sample are still operating a CSR type sponsorship rooted in values and social impact. Of course, the values piece is fantastic. The next stage that clubs can be working towards is a more kind of ROI based partnership backed by audience data. And then the media aspect of things, a very mixed landscape and sometimes out of the control of clubs, but fascinating examples of clubs having streaming audiences that are exceeding stadium audiences. So highlighting the importance of digital reach, even at lower ends of the game. The next key insight around AI adoption. So we would say that AI adoption is moving from informal to intentional. So it's yeah, what we saw, and this is really resonates with a lot of the work that we've done on AI in sport over the past 3 years. We're seeing a lot of AI use on an individual level. Um, so, yeah, and we're all using different tools in our day to day. We saw much less in terms of there being a strategic guidance, policy, more kind of strategic approach to embedding AI. Um, the there was a lot of interest and yeah, appeal about using AI, particularly where there's the potential to increase efficiencies among small agile teams. And really, the only resistance that we saw was around questions around creativity, data privacy, kind of governance questions, which some of those things can be addressed through a more kind of strategic approach to working with AI within organizations. The next insight, so this speaks to more of the structural barriers and challenges that women's clubs face, and they're structural challenges that really affect data collection and affect audience growth potential. So many of the clubs in the sample are renting or sharing facilities, venues. This is impacting on their ability to collect information within the physical venue, or to create the match day experience, or to activate sponsors and so on. And then there's some very really serious structural challenges that somehow no digital and data strategy can really solve, which is around geography and access and so on. So again, other structural challenges related to the governance and the relationship, and how they're set up as clubs, whether that's challenges, structural challenges related to being an independent club within the economic context, through to structural challenges being part of a men's team, and the pros and the cons that come with all kinds of governance and setup situations. So the these structural challenges, of course, make implementation and it makes clubs have small teams. It makes clubs have people working with split responsibilities, smaller budgets, short-term pressures, and so on. So difficult landscape, but more optimistically, what we did see as well that was that even smaller clubs making great progress with their small communities, where they had the technology aligned with the commercial strategy and the ways of working, and people kind of all aligned, which kind of leads on to the final insight, which is around um, around the uh, the leadership, so the cultural considerations, and this was really prominent as we went through. And maybe the most important insight for us is that clubs and women's football, not necessarily resistant to technology. There's a real understanding of the importance of fan data, of having data to make decisions, and to build intelligence about our audiences, to build a sustainable business. And so the leadership appetite is really high. The it's much less about cultural resistance or old ways of doing things. It was much more of a real kind of let's embrace this and let's do what we can. Wanting to learn from other examples, curious and seeing what clubs can do as as agile teams and really embracing digital technology to their advantage. As I said, there's a slide with lots of text, but it's this phases of digital maturity, which we go into a little bit more, but really paints an optimistic picture, both with good kind of cultural and leadership appetite towards digital data and AI, but also with some adjustments in ways of working and implementing certain things that can really make a big difference. So, very quickly, the implications for us, for clubs, for leagues, for sponsors, for investors, for everybody in this ecosystem. Um, it kind of it made us reflect that we all have a part to play in building the infrastructure behind the next stage of growth. So yes, clubs that need stronger fan data foundations and digital priorities. We're seeing that leagues are also helping through a kind of pooled and shared services and raising the floor there, benchmarking and providing support across the league. We're seeing that sponsors are also moving beyond traditional ROI and think that evolving sponsorship landscape also meets where women's football is and where it can work towards. And then technology providers. So there's a real need to design tools and commercial models that fit the scale and the reality of where women's football is today. And finally, got a nice QR code here. If you haven't already downloaded the report, we go into much more detail into these 6 insights. We have some brilliant examples and perspectives from clubs from Australia, Canada, Scotland, and Sweden, and of course insights from the other clubs and leagues involved. We have a set of recommendations for the different stakeholders in the women's football ecosystem and broader sports ecosystem. We zoom in a bit more on this AI opportunity for women's football, and we also hear from Data Talks, who are experts in fan monetization and data, who have been backing this work and bring that lens, particularly as it's so important on how to really, what can we do next with fan data. And so I will stop sharing and I'll hand back to Hannah. And yeah, thank you very much. And I hope it's provided an introductory insight into snapSHOT and the key findings.
Thank you so much, Lucy. I mean, you managed to cover so many of the details. As you said, of course, there's more in the report, but you packed in a lot there. And hopefully, as you say, people are finding this really relevant and useful to the work that they do. Before we dive into kind of more of the practical side of things with Stefan, I want to turn to you and ask you kind of a question more on the optimistic side of things, looking at sort of the data that we were able to collect through snapSHOT. What would you say in terms of the data that makes you feel most optimistic in terms of the growth for women's football? And how do you feel this can be channeled in a way forward to continue growing the game?
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. So optimistic because of the reception that we received when we went out to clubs. Clubs very busy, second half of the season. spending time helping us understand their day-to-day realities. And then secondly, is the kind of the sixth insight there around very little cultural resistance, which in sport sometimes sport can be quite traditional. We didn't get a sense of any kind of resistance to change, and so that brings me a lot of optimism. We also had clubs asking us for good examples, or what else can we learn and know and share. So it's really the cultural piece that I'm optimistic about, because the work that we've been doing at Ready over the past few years, yes, we've been working in and with technology, but it's actually about people. So yeah, that's what I'm optimistic about going forward.
Yeah, amazing. And kind of specifically thinking about the AI opportunity, which you mentioned is in the report, the AI opportunity for women's football, and the optimism that you feel, and again, kind of the excitement that clubs are demonstrating toward using technology, and also the collaboration element, right? Not just thinking about clubs within the ecosystem, but then again, having brands, investors, sponsors, and again, just the wider ecosystem. Is there anything else that you want to say about the work that we're hoping to do kind of going forward as we build on snapSHOT?
Yeah, I think we have to work differently in women's football, given the where a lot of these clubs are. So whether that's looking at pooled services, or ways that companies and brands can activate around a common commercial theme with a cohort of clubs, whether that's promoting more open learning and share. I think we have to be yeah, creative, and it does take many, it takes different expertise from different areas, and to pull in. So I think it's we've almost like we've opened a can of worms. And now we're looking for like-minded collaborators to team up with, and to figure out how we can yeah, work together and work with women's football, and be the digital first, the AI enabled version of the sport that we know, while obviously taking into consideration the important safeguarding digital safety, and ethical considerations too. So yeah, it feels like it's just the start in a way.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. Of course, we'll come back, and if people have questions for Lucy, feel free to start putting those into the chat, and we will have that dedicated portion at the end. But I'm going to turn it over now to Stefan. Lucy used the analogy of opening a can of worms. Maybe Stefan, I don't know if you're part of that can of worms that we've opened up, and we're so happy to have you representing Data Talks with us today, and kind of on more of the practical side of things, starting first with thinking about some of the steps that clubs can take. Oftentimes, as Lucy shared, clubs have scattered data, whether that's ticketing, e-commerce, social media, kind of across different platforms and systems. Can you share a little bit about what you would advise clubs to do, and kind of taking those first steps to bringing that all together into more of a consolidated approach?
Absolutely, I would be happy to. And I'll from the start, I'll please excuse my voice. I do have a sore throat. It's not because I was out last night having a good time. It's me having a cold, and it's really hitting my voice. Sorry for that. But yeah, that's actually a great question. And interestingly enough, I was in London yesterday hosting a workshop, and one of the things that we kept on coming back to was exactly this. What are like the first practical steps? What do they look like? And everybody's like struggling to sort of understand what that is. And I don't think that there's one answer for like one generic answer. I think you have to sort of find your own way. But there are some things that I think, at least from my experience, that you can sort of bring into that work and finding the first steps. And the first thing I think you need to realize is that what you're embarking on is not a project, right? I think that's the first like mindset shift that you need to go through. It's a way of working, right? So this is not a project that you start, you do it, you deliver it, and then you walk away. So it's a way of working, which means that it will be an iterative approach, right? So each iteration we do, we will improve a little bit. So I think that's like you have to get that like mindset shifted a little bit. And then how do you then go about it? Well, first of all, like a lot of recommendations are, well, you need to find your North Star. Like this is the North Star. This is what we're aiming for. Let's go for that. The problem with that approach is that you really don't know if that North Star is relevant once you start like going like embarking on this journey, right? Which might be fine, but then you have the other thing is like then you might even timeline it and say like, well, we want to reach the North Star within 2 years, 3 years, 3 months, some sort of timeline. But that's also really hard to know because once you start working with it, you actually make these giant steps, and you might reach that North Star like much earlier than you expected. So what I would do instead is to find like the first like low-hanging fruit where you can actually show tangible ROI, right? So let's say that it might be like, okay, so we want to make sure that our first-time visitors they come one more game. So we get them into the stadium and then we get them to come one more time. Like that's the first case. We'll work with that. Get the data you need to sort of you like make that use case come to life and you prove that that actually works, which means that then you've gotten first-time visitors in and you've gotten them to come the next time, which means that you will have an ROI, which means that the whole willingness from the rest of the organization to invest in this will be higher. And then you can take the next step. So that's the approach that I would go for because there are a couple of things you have to think about here. And one is resistance to change. So giant steps are not recommended. There has to be a strong why you need to change. And ROI, showing money in is often like a good way of getting that why. Now, there's of course other things as well, but if we sort of simplify things a little bit. So that's the first thing that I would like as a practical step. The second one, I wouldn't go out chasing data. You have enough data. I'm quite sure. So that's not your problem. So taking ticketing, for instance, you have that data somewhere. If it's in an Excel sheet or if it's in an actual ticketing system, great, but you still have it. So use that. And then you combine it with something else like website data or app data, or combine it with email data. Start there and like use that for your basis for the first like segmentation piece to sort of support that use case that you're after. So you don't need to think that you have to find a lot of new data. So you probably have that. That's the second thing. Um, yeah, let's I could go on, but I think those are like and I think the most important thing is like that mindset thing and like trying to just scale it down a little bit, just taking these small baby steps because that will increase the whole willingness from the whole club to actually uh keep pushing on this.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. I mean, I think you've provided some really practical first steps, as you say, for clubs to take. And I really like how you talked about the importance of kind of the flexibility and adaptability around, sure, have an approach, but kind of break it down into those smaller pieces and have those use cases so that obviously you can work toward that longer term change. And we've talked already a little bit about the organizational shift as well. You talked about ticketing. I think this is a really interesting topic because we saw this come up a lot with the consultations, where clubs are obviously trying to grow audiences. The term that came up so often is get butts in seats. It sounds very kind of crude, but that's really it. Bringing fans, as you say, maybe once, but then hopefully bringing them back, for more games. And looking at how, ticketing data is typically collected by clubs, often there is just kind of an email and a name maybe associated with a purchase, but maybe they bought 10 tickets and you have no idea who those other nine attendees are. And also, are they tracking if all of those 10 people then show up to the game? So kind of thinking about ticketing and, clubs attempt to obviously keep the friction, the barriers low to purchase. What would you say, how can clubs balance that approach with obviously the need and the importance of building the useful first party fan data?
Yeah, and that's also actually a very good question. And I'm a firm believer that Sorry, I'm a firm believer that with any purchase, you should keep it low friction. So I think that's like the most important thing is, and especially in ticketing, and especially like in where we are right now, I think that that's more important than in that purchasing moment, collect a lot of more data, right? So just collect the data points that you actually need to make the purchase go through. That's enough. I mean, that's fine, and I'll give you some reasons for it. One is that once they bought the ticket, you can sequence sort of the data capture, right? So when they sort of progress coming closer to the game day, you can start collecting more data across that journey. So it's something you actually build, so you don't have to build everything from scratch. You can do it as you go along. And one good example is that if it's a first time buyer, well, then you want to keep that friction really low, so they actually buy the ticket. And then you might even wait to collect any more data until after the game when you send out that nice email saying like, listen, great that we won. We were so happy that you were there. Who was your favorite player? So that could be one. Or like if it doesn't go your way, it's like, sorry that we lost, but we were so happy that you were there to cheer for us. We have to have your support in the next game. It's very important. Uh, who was your favorite player? So I mean, you should sequence it that way. And also the fact that you actually get them to buy the ticket is actually a gateway to more data, right? So once they bought the ticket, you'll know when they bought it, how far in advance, what kind of a ticket they actually bought. You will know when they actually, if you scan the ticket, you will know when they actually arrived to the stadium. So you can start like adding up that behavior as well. So just the purchase itself sort of leads to more data without you having to ask for anything. So when you sort of think, well, low friction or ask for more data, like then I would still like in any purchase, I would keep it low. And then you sort of think about how can we collect the data points that we need after that purchase is done, rather than sort of jeopardizing the actual ticket purchase.
Yeah, amazing. I love that you mentioned kind of a fan journey because obviously that's what we're talking about here, right? We don't want them just to go to that one game. We want it to really start building the relationship with that individual. And obviously, if they're purchasing for a family or a partner, that those other individuals that they represent. And as you say, looking for the right opportunities to continue to build their engagement and not just see it as a one-off ticket purchase.
Yeah.
I think that, this really lends itself nicely to something that Lucy, of course, touched on, that we dig into in the report as well around when we look at sponsorship. I think for a long time there was, it was enough to obviously demonstrate values alignment, which of course is still important and fantastic. And I think that often lends to more meaningful and longer term partnerships. But when we think about, sponsors who maybe are now starting to ask clubs, what's the impact, looking for more of kind of a measurement approach. And as we look to kind of move from that corporate social responsibility or CSR kind of focused, a partnership to something that is more rooted in ROI, return on investment. What would you say is, how can how can clubs better develop that? And again, utilizing this fan journey, the data that you say that clubs already have, how can they do that better so that they, of course, can then go to sponsors with more of the impact?
Yeah. So there are a couple of aspects to this, and the first one is like let's also acknowledge that like the women audience is actually an advantage. Like if you look at different surveys around that, you will see that it's a younger audience. They're more engaged. They're actually higher earnings in it as well, which means that as a collective, it's an interesting audience for any sponsor to get into, right? So that's the first thing. So and that's really important to realize if you want to shift it from the CSR to the ROI, because you will need to sell it basically in another way. And that brings me to my second point, and that is if you work in sales and you have an offering that's worked before, you'll keep doing that, right? And you won't really notice as a salesperson, you won't really notice that the average order value is actually declining, and you might not even care because you're measured on actually getting the sales done. So you have something that works, then you'll keep pushing it. So what you have to do is you have to start measuring in the way that you want your salespeople to behave. So no matter who's doing the sales, if it's the CEO or if it's everyone in the club or whatever the structure is, you have to make sure that you measure the right thing. So if you want to shift from CSR to ROI, well, then you need to create new packages, and then you need to measure not just that the sales is done, but it's done in the way that you want it to. Otherwise, you will never get that shift. And then the second thing is, or the third thing, I guess it is, and that's like start working with some simple data-driven activations to create that ROI. It doesn't have to be that difficult, and it doesn't have to involve like these massive data points and out-of-the-box analytics from some vendor. It doesn't have to be that difficult. Just think about it like as a good example. So do a gamification campaign, a sponsor-branded gamification campaign. Start that like select the starting 11, get people engaged in that and enjoying that gamification campaign. So then you'll do one thing first, you'll get the exposure. So it's sponsor branded, the sponsor gets the exposure, great, and people engage and people play it, fantastic. And then from that, you will get an audience that you know have been exposed to the sponsor's brand. Fantastic. You just created a segment. A segment that is like that has that sponsor brand on top of their head. So someone will win, great. Then you can make a sort of a content play out of that. Whoever won something from the sponsor, fantastic. The rest will receive a message from the sponsor saying, "Sorry you didn't win, but here's 10% off on your next purchase. Visit the website here." Which means that you can track whoever you send to the website, or you can track it. So that means that you can show the whole journey from like the first touch point until the last one. And you will know that they know their conversions, which means that it's really easy to do that calculation of the ROI. So all of a sudden, you've actually done the shift. You've gone from that CSR to the ROI, and you're there. And then, of course, you can work from there, and getting is just as advanced as you want to. There are other things you can do as well, like making sure that you actually give access to the sponsors to high intent audiences, like being a bit thinking ahead a little bit, like, okay, so what kind of a sponsor do we actually want and what do they care about? And then you go out and ask your fans those questions that you need to understand the preferences. And when you understand the preferences, you can create high intent audiences that you can then say to the sponsor, do you want to connect with these? Of course they do. And they'll pay a larger amount for that than for any, I would say, any exposure play that you would present to them. So that's sort of my thinking around that.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, you've provided so many practical ideas and tips there. And I think, I mean, just as you're talking about gamification and just the way that, some of these activations can be set up, it's just so clear how important, technology and data are really becoming actually to, being able to move from that CSR, style partnership to something that is more rooted in, in ROI. Shifting a little bit, I think we've covered some really interesting aspects here, but moving kind of toward the AI piece, which I think is a little bit newer for many clubs. And as we saw in snapSHOT, a lot of the AI usage across clubs is more at the individual level. The clubs maybe aren't yet kind of at the place where they have any kind of policies or structures in place. There are a few maybe that are starting to purchase subscriptions, for example, to, an LLM for staff to use. But where do you see, especially from kind of the data and CRM perspective, where do you think AI can actually create the most immediate value for women's football clubs, and where should clubs be careful?
Hmm. So I think it's like a two-sided question in one way, because like the immediate, I would say like the immediate impact is actually on like the productivity and efficiency side for each individual person. Like they can use AI in their day-to-day work. There's a
Mhm.
good example that Wolfsburg actually presented in one of the events, and they created a agent that would do all the translations. So they had an agency previously to doing that, but then they created an agent for it, and all of a sudden they could be more efficient and do it easily by themselves, and they could actually save some money. All right, so that's a good example. But so that's one side where you can get some really immediate like impact. But if we're talking like on the fan side and on the fan data side, there's some other areas where AI will definitely have a impact quite quickly, and that is, of course, delivering insights. Naturally, I mean, AI is great with that. Also, segmentation. AI is fantastic in seeing structures and cohorts that we would normally not see ourselves. So that's another way, like a very quick impact. and also making sure that you can actually work through workflows much faster. So like being able to actually automate at scale in a completely different way. AI is great at that, but it's only great at that if the foundation that you feed into it is good. So before you start thinking in those terms of segmentation, automation, and things like that, make sure that you have the foundation that the AI can work off of. Um, and it doesn't have to be that hard. It goes back to like don't chase a lot of data. Make sure that the data you have is actually connected and it's structured in a way that AI can make sense of it. I think that's really important. And just to touch on where to be careful, I think a rule of thumb is something like just because you have the data doesn't mean that you should act on it. So use your common sense, which is something that AI doesn't have. So let's use our human advantage there and like use it in a way that makes sense even for the one who's receiving something. So I think that's important. And of course, I mean, keeping up with all the compliance rules and regulations is obviously very, very important. It can go sideways quite quickly, and you can get fined quite heavily as well. So make sure that you're compliant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Well, thank you so much, Stefan. I feel like we've covered a lot in a short amount of time. Everything from kind of the sponsorship, model, and of course, just talked a little bit about the AI approach, and of course, before that, looking a little bit more into the fan engagement and segmentation side of things. I think now would be a good time to open it up for questions from our participants. So. I'm going to have a quick look at the chat. It looks like we've got some comments and questions coming in. If you haven't put those in, please feel free to do those now. Just for sake of time, we won't ask people to unmute, so we'll just be asking on behalf of what people have put in the chat. And it looks like Lucy has already been responding to a few. All right, so I see a question here. I'm just going to read it, and then I'm going to invite either Stefan or Lucy, or maybe both of you want to take a crack at it. But question is from Vinaya. And she says, building on that, to what extent can the men's game actually serve as a blueprint for AI and tech adoption in women's football? Where does the parallel hold and where does it break down completely, given that the women's game has a fundamentally different commercial structure, fan base, and growth trajectory? Great question. I guess it's a two-part question. I'm not sure who wants to take a crack at that first.
Yeah, great question. Thank you, Vinaya. So first of all, we're seeing where women's clubs are part of men's teams and they're professionalizing within men's structures. So there you have an incredible resource. So you've got often data scientists and bigger teams who you can really women's teams can really leverage and learn from and have shared resources. So I think that's an opportunity where that is possible. Secondly, I think where there's potential difference, speaking very high level, but of course, some of the bigger professional clubs have much bigger revenues, much bigger budgets, big systems. Not to say that they've always worked, but and women's football just doesn't have often that luxury, particularly the independent clubs and the newer clubs. So, but I think the opportunity is that is to leapfrog some of those legacy heavy systems, right? So we're seeing that there's open source or light or tools that are becoming much more affordable and accessible. So I think that's what I see. It's either looking at the best from the men's game and learning, um, or leveraging what's different and working in that agile way. And I'd love to hear Stefan's response, given that he's working across men's and women's clubs.
Yeah. So first of all, I think that the best ideas and the best innovations, they don't come from the ones with the big budgets. So they actually come from the ones with the small budgets that have to be really creative. So they need to find ways to work, which is sometimes even better than the bigger clubs, just because it's they have to be more innovative. So that's one thing. So I don't think that a big budget is necessarily actually helpful, to be honest, when you're like going into a new area, because sometimes you need to have that sort of hunger to be really innovative. So that's the first thing. Then there's of course like there are similarities. I mean, we're talking about technology, and technology doesn't care if it's a women's football club, if it's a co-owned football club, or if it's a men's, or if it's big, or if it's small. There's some things that are just like you have to just work with. And one is if you want to go in and you want to start using AI for monetization purposes or whatever, then you have to build that foundation. You can't skip the steps. You have to work through some certain steps because no matter how big of a budget, if you put garbage in, you'll get garbage out. It's just that with a big budget, you get a lot of garbage in, and then AI amplifies it, which means that there's mega garbage going out. So I just make sure that you don't skip any steps, and you don't need today with the technology that's out there, you don't need a big budget. I think that's something we have to stop thinking, and then just like you'll find the solutions because they're out there for sure. Otherwise, you can build them yourself. Use Lovable, vibe code.
Are you getting sponsored, Stefan? Gotta code
Absolutely
down
not.
in the Oh, thank you both, Lucy and Stefan. A great question and great responses. I mean, I hope that's encouraging for those on the call who maybe are working with smaller clubs or clubs with smaller budgets, that you can still do so much, especially as we get into kind of the new frontier of AI and other emerging technologies. I'm gonna go to the next question from Delphina. Thank you so much for that. She says, have a question about AI use related to fan sensitivity to inauthentic Gen I content. How are clubs thinking about where AI is appropriate to use versus where it risks damaging trust with fans? This is a great question. Definitely came up a few times in the consultations where, of course, clubs were talking about challenges they were having with their marketing team, trying to really find the balance between something we talked about streamlining, workflows, but also again, as you say here, kind of making sure that the content doesn't end up being inauthentic. So yeah, Stefan or Lucy, not sure, hand it over to either of you to take that.
I would love to start, and then you can tag on maybe, Lucy. Yeah. So I think this is such a absolutely great question. So let me give you an example. The way that we work with this, first of all, I mean, you can use the way that we structure the AI in our platform is that it can create everything for you, right? So it can create the segments, it can create actually the campaigns, like everything is like prepared, but it never ever sends anything. You always have to prove it, and I think that's like that's a good way. You need to prove it because you need to put your own eyes on it. But what we do, and you still need to put eyes on it, even if we do this. We create a content library. So we take in all like images, we take in all videos, we take in all content from the website, we take in all emails that have gone out, any copy that you've sent, we take that in and we let the AI be taught on your specific content, right? And copy to make it like look like you as much as possible. And still, you need to correct it. There's still like these small things that you still that it gets it very, very right, but not completely. But it does still help you because I mean it makes the workflow faster and you can do more with less effort and so on. But you still have to be very, very cautious about exactly this, I think. So I think like always making sure that there are guardrails and that you don't let AI send anything. You always approve.
Yeah, and now I would just say that the premise or the promise of AI in workflows and supporting with efficiencies, I think you have to be really not just common sense, but also smart about when it's used for what. And okay, if you're saving time here, then spend it on the things that are important, which is the fan facing and the content that really amplifies your identity as a club and the different touch points that we have with people. But as Hannah said, and Delphina, thank you for the question. It was one of the biggest concerns that women's clubs had about AI, and it was that inauthenticity related to the creative process. So yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Stefan and Lucy. So I'm going to move next to a question from Quentin. How do you manage acknowledged men's sports bias in the machine learning because of the more archive on men's sports economics in all databases? Good, really good question.
Well, yeah, so this is in our broader Ready life. We spend a lot of time on this very topic, and as well in the consultations. I would say the second biggest concern was around gender biases and historical data not quite meeting the needs of women's football. So it's a very real challenge and issue. The data that is fed into LLMs that we use is historical data, and there are a lot of inequalities and unequal representation within that data. So this is a bigger AI in society question. I think for women's sport, so there is some really good stuff being done to counter historical gender biases. I mean, I take the inspiration from World Rugby, for example, that were intentional about adjusting the way that women's rugby and men's rugby appeared in Google searches and Google rankings. So I would say that the way that we overcome this is with intention. And there are institutions and yeah, across sport that are dealing with this and focused on this. And so if anybody's interested, I'd love to continue this conversation offline. Another related topic very quickly, I think as well, is that as we're promoting women's football as operating like digital businesses, the internet is of course not neutral, and we need to also look at the context and the internet context that women's sport is dealing with. And so digital safety, building online communities, they're not just neutral, they're littered with sexism and all kinds of abuses that really hinder the authenticity of athletes and clubs to post and engage. So there are many dimensions to this that we could spend the next half a day talking about. But thank you, Quentin, for raising this point. And I would say, yeah, with intention.
Amazing. Thank you, Lucy. Stefan, anything you wanted to add quickly, or should we go to another question?
Just really quickly, there are things some practical things that you can do to sort of mitigate that risk, and that is to make sure that the context you feed into the AI takes care of it. So creating a proper context for the AI to work off of can mitigate some of that bias risk.
Yeah, amazing. Really helpful. If anyone's been watching the World Cup, I think too, people have been rightly pointing out just some of even the coverage there, in the media about how records are acknowledged across players and countries. And again, to Lucy's point, just still a lot to do on sort of the sexism side of things in the sport. Okay, really quickly, I think we have probably time for one more question. So from David, he says, we'd love to hear your thoughts on how we balance the need for commercial growth in women's football and sport, including better use of fan data with a model that treats fans as co-creators or beneficiaries of that growth rather than simply as consumers to be further monetized. What mechanisms should exist to ensure that value flows back to fans through affordability, access, voice, or shared benefit? Great question.
Thanks, David. So I think we could spend a whole hour workshopping this very topic. I think very quickly, knowing our audiences is I think is also key to that. And then there are clubs that are very values and identity strong and focused and community minded. And there's brilliant. I'll just use like Glasgow City in Scotland as a great example of that, where they're community minded and they have a genuine interest in their community and their fans. And so if they get to know them more, they will be able to better serve and promote that kind of co-creation environment. I think it's with intention. We're at a kind of a pivotal, interesting point in the professionalization of the game, and of course, a lot of investment money is coming in. There's different models being set up, and ultimately, yeah, having people that believe in continuing this, the DNA of women's football in those leadership positions is really important, and that we keep talking about it and amplifying the clubs like Glasgow who are leading that way. But yeah, thanks for the question and for bringing it to this conversation.
Amazing. Thanks, Lucy. Stefan, anything you want to add?
I think Lucy did a great job of covering that. Yeah.
All right, amazing. I know we're at time, so Ren, I'm so sorry we've run out of time to maybe dive into your question, but we will share our contact information and of course be following up with the recording. So hopefully we can tackle that offline. And just want to again acknowledge and thank everyone for your engagement and your participation. I'm going to quickly hand it over to Lucy just to give us a final words to close out the session.
Yeah, and I'd like to just say, first of all, thank you to everyone for joining. Thank you to the clubs that participated. Thank you to Hannah, who actually led a lot of these consultations and really forced us to go really, really deep into it. In terms from our side, yeah, please do look at the report, get in contact if the themes and resonate with you. From our side, this is, as I said, a starting point. We do offer training and education in these areas. We're looking at creative ways to go back to women's football and activate around commercial themes with sponsors and collaborators. So love to hear from you, and yeah, just a big thank you, and looking forward to connecting with many of you offline. So yeah, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.